With Sunderland doing so well in the Premier League, it's easy to forget that just a few short seasons ago we were playing down in the third division of English football. Some fans have taken to dubbing this era the Banter years, a pretty valid name if you ask me. In this video I'm going to take a look at Sunderland's Banter era and try and pick a starting 11 of players who only played for Sunderland during the Banter years. I'm defining the Banter era as follows: the start of the 2017-18 season, which was the season where we came last in the Championship, to the end of the 21-22 season, which is the season where we won the League One playoff final. So that's one season in the Championship where we finished last, and 4 seasons in League One. Remember, I'm only picking players who only played for Sunderland during this time period, so if you came down from the Premier League with us, or back up to the Championship with us, you aren't valid. Let's see if I can pick a team that would be good enough to escape from League One. Right, let's get into it, shall we? I've decided to go with a 4-4-2 formation, mostly because there are 2 decent strikers I decided to pick, and the centre midfield position is a little bit of a wobbly one. So I decided to not go with the kind of modern 4-3-3, because picking 3 half-decent centre midfielders turned out to be much harder than picking 2 half-decent strikers. Let's start with the goalkeeper. Now, as I'm sure most of you will be aware, the selection over the 5-season Banter era spell was pretty dire when it comes to goalkeepers. There's not an awful lot of choice, to be honest, especially with Anthony Patterson doing so well the season we came up, and obviously he made it out the back of the Banter era. There are a few who are an absolutely no, I would not touch these goalkeepers with a barge pole. And to be honest, I'm sure you'll agree with me when I say the names Jason Steele, Remy Matthews and Lee Camp. I do not wish to see those performances again from those chaps. And it is quite strange, and fair play to Jason Steele that he's doing relatively well here and there with Brighton. But if you told me that back when he was playing for us, I would have laughed at you, to be honest. He was really bad in a Sunderland shirt. There's a few who fall in perhaps a maybe pile. I'm thinking of Lee Burge mostly, who had some relatively decent performances for Sunderland. He was kind of sporadically playing for us. He was quite often the second choice goalkeeper to the player I'm going to pick, and I think it's the obvious choice of the Banter era, and that's John McLaughlin. He played for us across 2 seasons, all in League One, just shy of 100 games, I think it's 90 or so. But he put in some really good performances for Sunderland and is, in my opinion, the easy pick for goalkeeper. Starting our defensive line, we'll go with the right back. Now, there's quite a few who you could maybe make a case for, but actually aren't eligible because they either played for Sunderland before or after the Banter era. You could go with Billy Jones or Adam Matthews from that Championship season, both of whom unfortunately played in the Premier League for Sunderland. Later in the League One days, of course, there was Niall Huggins and Trey Hume, who got promoted with Sunderland, so aren't eligible for this video. There were a couple of players who filled in at right back when their natural position wasn't right back per se. I'm looking at Lyndon Gooch, Luke O'Nien, again, both players who aren't eligible for this, unfortunately, but otherwise would have been pretty good picks. Actually, I think Lyndon Gooch is the only player who played for Sunderland before and also after my self-declared Banter era I'm referring to. That might be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. A slightly more obscure one I remembered was Carl Winchester. He had a spell filling in at right back and did a pretty good job there actually. So I thought, great, we'll go with Carl Winchester. However, Carl Winchester has 1 single appearance for Sunderland in the season we returned to the Championship, right at the start of the season in one of the cups, which makes him not eligible as well. From what I can see, this pick is narrowed down to 2 players. We've got Tyus Browning, who played for us on loan in the Championship, and obviously only the Championship. Tyus Browning, these days known as Jiang Guang Tai, and our only other pick is Conor McLaughlin, who played for us across a couple of seasons in League One, and I think I'm going to go with Conor McLaughlin. We've picked 2 players and they're both called McLaughlin. What are the chances of that? Let's go on to the other side of our defence before we move back into the centre and do our left back. A couple of names would have been nice, but unfortunately aren't eligible. Brian Oviedo and Dennis Serkin are the obvious 2 that come to mind. Obviously, Serkin got promoted with us, and Oviedo came down with us from the Premier League. Another player who would have worked here, once again, is Luke O'Nien. He basically has played across the entire defence of Sunderland and most of the midfield in his time here. So he would have been nice to fill this gap, but unfortunately he doesn't work. Someone who does work is Declan John. However, it seems odd to pick him based on his performances in a Sunderland shirt, considering he literally didn't play a game for Sunderland. To be honest, I think the choice is sort of made for me, and we're going to go with Denver Hume, who played for Sunderland in League One before leaving and going to Portsmouth. Denver Hume did make one appearance in the Championship, the season we got relegated, but he was gone before we got back up to the Championship again. Let's go on to our two centre-backs now, and there's a couple of half-decent players who played for us during the Banter era who unfortunately aren't eligible, such as John O'Shea, Bailey Wright and Danny Bart. There are, however, of course, a couple of stinkers who would be eligible, but we're obviously not going to pick them. I'm looking at you, Glenn Lubens. Alan Ozturk wasn't great, and legendary zero appearance Tommy Smith is unfortunately not quite making the cut. Jordan Willis narrowly misses out, but he was so injury prone for us that I don't think I can pick him. Instead, I'm going to go for two players who both played a single season on loan to us when we were in League One, and they are Dion Sanderson and Callum Doyle, which isn't a bad centre-back pairing for League One if you ask me. And that completes our back line. Let's move on to the right side of midfield. I was looking at Duncan Watmore, but he obviously played for us way back in the Premier League. Jack Diamond would also have been quite a good choice, but he actually played a single game after we got promoted back to the Championship. The best player who probably played down the right hand side in the Banter era was little Paddy Roberts. I don't know who managed to convince him to drop down to the third tier, but frankly that person should be given a medal. Obviously he came up with us, so doesn't work for this team. A couple of the lads who are eligible, but we're going to politely swerve them, are Jordan Jones, Leon Diaku and Callum McManaman. We'll just give those guys a miss, I think. It seems a pretty obvious choice, to be honest, who we're going to go with. It's the player who was perhaps generously called the King by some fans. That's going to be Chris Maguire. He was part of our squad that won the Papa John's trophy, but he actually left before we got promoted from League One, where he went to Lincoln and did very little aside from terrorise us at the Stadium of Light, of course. On the left side of midfield, I'm actually going to keep the waffle to a minimum because this is the easiest position to pick, in my opinion. The answer is Aidan McGeady. I know what you're thinking. Aidan McGeady? Sunderland Banter era? What are you talking about? Aidan McGeady joined Sunderland the season we got relegated from the Premier League. He was a Simon Grayson signing, and Aidan McGeady left after we got promoted from League One. He was released and ended up going up to Hibs, I think. So Aidan McGeady's entire Sunderland career is the entire length of the Sunderland AFC banter period that I have described. Aidan McGeady is the measure of Sunderland AFC banter, somehow, which seems unfair. He was the best player in League One to wear a Sunderland shirt, certainly one of. I'm not even going to bother going through the rest. Aidan McGeady. Now, picking two centre midfielders has actually proved a lot more challenging than I thought it would be, to be honest, because most of the good ones either played for us before the Banter era or after the Banter era. Players like George Honeyman and Lee Cattermole came down with us, so obviously played for us before the Banter era. George Honeyman, of course, left Sunderland and then got promoted out of League One before we did with Hull City. Grant Ledbetter was another one here. Now, he didn't come down with us or get promoted with us, but he obviously did play for Sunderland back in the noughties, so he doesn't count either. Dan Neal, Elliot Embleton, Corey Evans, Alex Pritchard, Jay Matete, and Luke O'Nien again all came up with us, so don't count either. Naturally, there are a few stinkers who I want to avoid for obvious reasons. We've got Dylan McGeoch, Josh Scowen, George Dobson, Johnny Williams, and anyone remember this name? Ruben Samot? I don't want to pick you guys. No thank you. One of the centre midfield picks was relatively easy. I've gone with Max Power, who was our club captain for a spell only in League One. Again, he left and ended up getting promoted before we did with Wigan Athletic. I say before we did. They went up as champions. We won the playoffs. For the other centre midfielder, despite what I just said, our choices are really limited. So I'm going to go with George Dobson. He always struck me as a trier, is about the best thing I can say about him. He did score that goal away at Burnley in one of the cups. He perhaps just pips Josh Scowen, I think. He wasn't great, but like I say, centre midfield has been quite a challenging area of the field. And finally, we get to the front two, our pair of strikers up top. We actually had a few really decent strikers in the Banter Era days, such as Josh Madger. Unfortunately, he doesn't work because of a single appearance in the Premier League season we got relegated. There was also Joel Asoro, who was coming through about the same time as Josh Madger. Again, he had a handful of appearances in the Premier League relegation season, so it doesn't work. Ross Stewart obviously banged goals as we got promoted from League One, so it doesn't count. And remember that Jermaine Defoe did play for us in the Banter Era, but obviously has his Premier League spell with us as well, so it doesn't count. Like so many of the other positions on this team, there are some players that work but are stinky, so we're not going to go with them. I'm looking at you, Will Grigg, Ashley Fletcher, Benji. I'm not going to pronounce the rest of his name because I can't, but we know who I mean when I say Benji. Remember that weird spell that Kyle Lafferty was a Sunderland player as well? Now, Antoine Semenyo technically does work, but if I'm going off appearances for Sunderland, I absolutely cannot pick him because he wasn't good in a Sunderland shirt. Part of me did think of picking him because of how well he's doing for Bournemouth, but I kind of want to base this around how they played for Sunderland, so Antoine Semenyo maybe harshly misses out. Now, the two strikers I'm going with both scored a decent amount of goals for Sunderland, albeit over quite different time periods. One, a relatively popular player, one, not so much. Let's start with popular, and we'll go with Charlie Wyke, who, if we're being honest, was spoon-fed by Aidan McGeady quite a lot in League One, but you can't knock him. Charlie Wyke put away an awful lot of goals in League One for Sunderland, and left before we got promoted, like Max Power, to Wigan Athletic. The not so popular player, and probably the most controversial pick in this team, is Lewis Grabban. Remember, he played for us that first 6 months in the Championship. Love him or hate him, he scored goals. He finished the season as Sunderland's top scorer, and he left us in January. That's perhaps more of a comment on how bad the rest of the team were, but Lewis Grabban scored goals for Sunderland. He obviously didn't want to be at Sunderland and left at the first opportunity, but he scored goals for us. He went to Aston Villa in that same January and scored goals for them as well as they got to the playoff final. For a bit of fun, why don't we do the manager as well? Obviously, Alex Neil was the man who eventually managed Sunderland to a escape from League One, so he doesn't count. We have 5 managers to pick from. There are 5 managers across the 5 seasons of Sunderland's Banter Era that fit. They spent their entire Sunderland time either in that Championship relegation season or in League One. And those 5 managers are Simon Grayson, Chris Coleman, Jack Ross, Phil Parkinson, and Lee Johnson.
Oh, Lord help us.
How on earth do I pick one of them? It's probably between Jack Ross and Lee Johnson for me. Jack Ross was the closest to getting promoted out of these managers, reaching a playoff final, which obviously we lost late to Charlton. But man, that team, Jack Ross should have had us in the automatics. There shouldn't even have been playoffs. So for that reason, we'll go with Lee Johnson narrowly. I'm not overjoyed with this choice, but it's probably the pick of the bunch. And just like that, there we have it. My Sunderland AFC Banter Era 11. Do you think this team would have been good enough to get out of League One? I think maybe playoffs. I don't think this team would be good enough to get out of League One automatically, unfortunately. Did I miss anyone obvious? Who would you have picked instead? Let me know in the comments below, and I hope to see you next time.